Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Metro Board activities for September 8th, 2022. Before we begin, I'd like to ask our Chief Safety Officer, Teresa Impastato, to provide us with a brief safety contact.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Exits are directly, when facing the front of the room, to your right. We don't have any planned tests of the alarm system. In the event the alarm system activates, we'll go out through the exit, gather in the lobby and await further instructions. The security forces will coordinate any emergency response protocols. There is an AED and a fire extinguisher located on this floor in the event of a medical emergency. I will fetch the AED and coordinate with our security forces to inform our first responders. Restrooms are out in the lobby, out the way you came in, directly to your left. And all security will be addressed with the individuals at the front desk. With regard to our safety contact, by being alert and reporting suspicious activity to Metro's law enforcement or a Metro employee, you can protect your family and other riders. As you're going about your trip, if you see something that doesn't seem quite right, say something. A suspicious item or object should be reported as what and where it is. If you aren't sure of what an object is, describe its characteristics, size, color, and material. Describe why you believe it is suspicious and provide any other immediate details relevant to the object. Any observed suspicious behavior needs to be avoided first, then reported. Leave the area and report it as soon as you can, always including time and location. You may wish to write down details in order to make an accurate and fully informed report. In the event of an emergency, call 911 or send a text message to Metro Transit Police using the QR codes on Metro posters, which allow you to text MTPD directly. When using Metro Rail, there are call boxes on each rail card which enable riders to report an emergency to the train operator who's in constant radio contact with Metro's central control. When using Metro Bus, in the case of any type of threatening or disruptive behavior aboard the bus, the operator can contact control and can activate a silent alarm that goes through central control to the police. For any additional information, see the rider guide at WMATA.com. This concludes our safety contact.
Thank you, Ms. Impastato. And welcome to today's Safety and Operations Brief, or Safety and Operations Committee. Since this is our first public meeting of the day, I'll ask Ms. Ellison, our Board Corporate Secretary, to call the roll.
Thank you. Chair Drummer.
Here.
Vice Chair Martin Proctor.
Good morning.
Mr. Smedberg.
Present.
Dr. Lowe.
Present.
Secretary Ports.
Present.
Ms. Klein. Mr. Letourneau.
Present.
Ms. Babers.
Present.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. Our first order of business is to approve the agenda. Are there any objections by members of the committee to the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Now to approval of minutes. We have the minutes from our July 14th meeting. Are there any objections to the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as presented. So our committee has one action item and two information updates this morning. First, the staff is asking our committee to approve the annual update to Metro's Agency Safety Plan, or ASP. Once this plan is approved by the board, it will be submitted to the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission, WMSC, for their approval, and then finally certified by the Federal Transit Administration. Of note, this is our third iteration of the ASP. Next, the committee will receive an update on Silver Line Phase 2 progress as we get closer to the start of passenger service. And finally, Ms. Impastato and Metro's new Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Brian Dwyer, will provide an after-action update regarding a power incident that occurred on the Red Line at the end of July. I'll turn the floor over to Ms. Impastato.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we could advance the slide, please. This presentation will provide a summary of the revisions to Metro's Agency Safety Plan and seek board approval of the Agency Safety Plan as required by regulation. Next slide, please. As a matter of background, the regulatory framework for the advancement of safety has evolved over the past decade toward the implementation of a safety management system. Safety management systems are a top-down systems approach to the management of safety risk that is comprised of four key components: safety policy, safety risk management, safety assurance, and safety promotion. Metro's agency safety plan documents the specific actions that we are taking to implement a safety management system in order to shift our safety paradigm from reactive to proactive. Metro's first agency safety plan was approved in 2020 and described the actions that Metro was taking to orient the agency around our commitment to safety management system implementation. In 2021, we developed safety risk management tools and processes and focused our efforts on piloting these processes within the Rail Operations Control Center. In 2022, we've incorporated the lessons learned through these pilots and expanded our implementation to other groups within operations. Included in the third revision of the plan are a number of system enhancements that will expand the implementation, critically assess our progress, and apply continuous improvement to our journey. The officially chartered and established Joint Labor Management Safety Committee is a requirement of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Metro established this committee in June of 2022, 1 month in advance of the July 31st deadline. The Joint Labor Management Safety Committee is comprised of equal representation from Metro's 5 labor unions and management of all modes in operations, maintenance, capital, and support departments. The Joint Labor Management Safety Committee has met 4 times since its inception and will continue to meet a minimum of monthly. This committee reviews hazards and is working to implement aspects of our collaborative partnership with MITRE, as well as to oversee the implementation of our safety management systems. Metro also included in this revision of our agency safety plan our pandemic response plan incorporated by reference. This pandemic response plan has guided our response to the COVID-19 pandemic and has been updated, informed by the lessons learned throughout the evolution of the pandemic for future application should we have a pandemic event. Additionally, we've established targets for reduction of employee assault incidents. This has been established in consultation with Metro Transit Police Department, as well as the Joint Labor Management Safety Committee. And we've included expanded de-escalation training. Metro has a long history of performing de-escalation training. When the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act was passed, we took a critical assessment and identified some opportunities for expanding that training and are now rolling out the revised and expanded process throughout the organization. Additionally, this version of our agency safety plan details our partnership with MITRE, a not-for-profit, federally funded research and development center. MITRE is supporting the Joint Labor Management Safety Committee, providing guidance and training on safety management systems and offering insights based on their industry experience in other modes of transportation to reduce safety risk and develop innovative solutions to safety problems. MITRE is assisting us in the performance of our first ever safety culture assessment, which kicks off September the 13th. This assessment will run for a period of 2 weeks and will inform a baseline establishment of Metro's safety culture in accordance with a multi-dimensional maturity model. This baseline will serve to orient and anchor any improvement efforts that we're making to our safety culture. Additionally, MITRE is helping us improve, enhance, and integrate our voluntary safety reporting efforts and advancing our safety data analytical capabilities, moving from the ability to analyze lagging indicators to developing leading indicators and eventually deploying machine learning and artificial intelligence to develop predictive models in terms of risk management. The agency safety plan now provides significant detail regarding formal feedback mechanisms and the dispositioning of comments and suggestions from employees. For this revision of the agency safety plan, first and foremost, it was posted publicly, and we queried all Metro employees with the opportunity to provide specific comment. That comment, which was provided, was appropriately dispositioned in a transparent manner. The Joint Labor Management Safety Committee did receive a draft of the agency safety plan in June at their first meeting, which they reviewed in detail at a meeting in July. All input from the Joint Labor Management Safety Committee was included in the plan, and the Joint Labor Management Safety Committee unanimously approved Metro's agency safety plan in their July meeting. Additionally, we have sent our agency safety plan to the Federal Transit Administration for a courtesy review and have incorporated their feedback. and have worked with the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission, our state safety oversight agency, to incorporate their feedback into the plan. We are confident that we have heard from our critically involved stakeholders internally as well as externally and have reflected that progress and marched towards full implementation of an SMS in our plan. With regard to our timeline for the agency safety plan, we've expanded the timeline for review, beginning the process for review this year in May, looking at internal reviews, updates, revisions, and annotations that included the enhancements to our plan. We are now at the point where the revisions have been finalized. We've reviewed with the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission and have received conditional approval for the current version of the agency safety plan that's been presented to the board. Our next steps over the remainder of the year are to receive board review and approval, and then to send the finalized approved version to the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission for their final review and official approval from their Board of Commissioners, and then to certify our compliance with our agency safety plan to the Federal Transit Administration at the end of the year. With regard to our next steps, we respectfully request that the board consider adopting the current version of the agency safety plan, and we will continue to develop and implement Metro's SMS in accordance with this plan, providing the board regular updates through the board's Safety and Operations Committee. This concludes our presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Thank you, Ms. Impastato. So I'll start by asking members of the committee if they have any questions or comments. Dr. Murphy.
Ms. Impastato, it's a small thing, but I noticed in August you still had blue highlighted on that prior slide. Is that, are there other activities there?
No, that's completed.
Okay, so that should be a gray, and so now we're at approval. Thank you.
Dr. Lowe?
I have just a few comments. The first is that I am really impressed that with this could just be a formality, it could just be updating, an already long existing document. But I'm really impressed that instead I see real progress in terms of how WMATA is thinking about safety. I wanted to flag in particular just what's most exciting about this from a board perspective for me is the critical assessment metrics that are baked in. I think that WMATA is really entering new territory in terms of being able to measure how we're doing, and that is really huge. So that's very exciting from a board perspective. I also wanted to flag the Joint Labor and Management Committee. And as you think about implementing this plan and how this plan lives going forward, I think this is a really critical piece, not just mandated by the federal government, but also something that addresses the reality of what we go through at WMATA. There's a recent Gallup survey that found that organizations with unionized workforces have lower employee engagement than other organizations, and that one of the consequences of lower employee engagement can be higher safety risks. So that isn't specific to WMATA. That was a national Gallup survey. But what to do about that is to engage labor as a partner in leading on safety. And this framework gives us the structure to do that, but it's only gonna happen if we make it real. So I hope that's what's gonna happen with implementation going forward. It's incredibly fun and sexy to be able to say, like, we're gonna use machine learning to find risks. I'm a data scientist, so that's exciting, that's cool too. But it's some of this more basic nuts and bolts stuff that I think can make the biggest difference for WMATA. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, and I think the timing really has been advantageous and serendipitous for us, that the time at which we're standing up the Joint Labor Management Safety Committee, which we were working on something to assure co-creation and collaboration with our labor organizations before the Infrastructure Improvement Act came out. We had to take a step back and make sure that we were in full compliance with the provisions, but we had always intended to have direct input from labor. Our Joint Labor Management Safety Committee is actually leading the rollout of our safety culture survey. And they will be tasked with working with Metro Management through the committee mechanism to identify opportunities for improvement and developing tactical actions to improve safety. They're also working very closely, guided by MITRE, on enhancing our voluntary safety reporting programs. We recognize we're only as strong as the culture that reports and identifies safety concerns, and this committee will serve as a cornerstone of that effort, that the individuals that have been engaged and involved in this committee, it's been truly remarkable as a safety professional to see the level of engagement of our labor organizations and the Metro Management team in changing our culture to be more proactive, to encourage reporting, and to see through the reports and disposition the concerns in a transparent manner. So it's really an exciting time to be a part of Metro's safety culture improvement efforts.
Thank you for expanding on that.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions by other board members? Hearing none, I'd like to ask for a motion from a member of the committee to approve this item.
So moved, Ms.
So moved by Mr. Schmidberg. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Lowe. Ms. Ellison, can you call the roll? Call the vote.
Thank you. Mr. Drummer?
Aye.
Ms. Martin Proctor?
Aye.
Mr. Smedberg? Dr. Lowe?
Aye.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this time, we'll transition to Ms. Impastato for the next update.
Actually,
So
we're
good morning,
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Chairman, if it's okay. I'm going to
Silverline.
start off, but I'm tag
my error.
teaming with my
Thank you.
colleague.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So before providing an update on our operational readiness activities, let me first thank Board Member Letourneau for joining Randy and our team recently out at Dulles Yard. Next slide, please. Pictured here are some of our rail transportation staff, including Director Allison Hall and Superintendent Erica Briggs, who've been preparing interlocking operators there in the tower. I'd note that this was a very meaningful visit, as Mr. Letourneau has supported Metro's extension to Loudoun County, and thanks to his bold actions over the years, seeing trains in this yard and shop is the beginning of realizing that vision of transit providing an economic engine for Loudoun County. We deeply appreciate his support as a county supervisor and a board member. My colleague Teresa will review our safety certification process, and then I will return to talk about next steps in our march to passenger service. So last Thursday, we phased out contractors in the tower, and we now have 17 trained Metro employees moving trains in the yard as interlocking operators. We continue to work with the Airports Authority to address open items, and while testing continues, I want to assure the board that we have found no showstoppers. In the next slide, you'll see we're wrapping up employee selection of Silverline 2 assignments for a total of 450 station managers, train operators, elevator and escalator maintainers, car mechanics, and other staff needed to serve our customers. They're being familiarized with the physical characteristics of the infrastructure and facilities this month. And starting early next month, we will simulate service over 2 weeks to give our team an opportunity to get questions answered and practice new routines. The picture on this slide is from the drill with law enforcement that we conducted at Dulles Yard, our first opportunity to fully exercise incident management jointly with our partners in both Loudoun and Fairfax counties, which Teresa will address more in a moment. The next slide shows our current progress towards Metro accepting extension from the Airport Authority, and in addition to the punch list, the others that are still advancing to green include records and warranties that are typically delivered all at once, right at acceptance, and they are administered by MWA, but warranties, for example, are then transferred to WMATA. And this is typically something that happens all at once and is not a cause for concern in terms of our schedule for delivering the service. Also, just wanted to note for the board, we're getting full cooperation from MWA on these and other items. And on the next slide, you'll see that Teresa is now going to talk about the safety certification process, and then I'll come back to review next steps and answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Lynn. This slide reviews briefly the structure of the safety certification process relative to the turnover once ORD was reached. We've completed our concurrence with MWA's safety and security certification of packages A and B, which govern the safety certification for the mainline stations and Dulles Yard. We've submitted that information as interim and preliminary to the Washington Metro Rail Safety Commission, who continue to walk through the system and participate in Metro's internal rail activation meetings. We are currently progressing safety certification of Metro-led elements, such as automated fare collection, arts and transit, signage and graphics. The bulk of the remaining activities are in our pre-revenue activities, which are training and certification of the Silver Line workforce, as well as the performance of simulated service. The submission of the final safety and security certification documentation for Package A on the main line, Package B in the yard, and Package K, work that has been deferred into the current effort beyond ORD, is underway. Next slide, please. This slide represents current progress of the certifiable items list. The certifiable items list includes thousands of safety critical system points that have been identified for review to assure conformance with design, proper installation, and overall to ensure that there's no risk associated with the operation. You'll see that the mainline, yard, and automatic fare collection are currently trending 100% complete with regard to the certifiable items list. We do have some remaining certifiable items in signage and graphics, all of which are actively underway, and we don't foresee any concerns or issues that would jeopardize the timely completion of the certifiable items list. Next slide. With regard to workshops and full-scale exercises, Metro has conducted 4 tabletop exercises from December of 2020 through December of 2021. Those 4 exercises those 4 tabletops, informed a workshop and full-scale exercises. The first workshop dealt with maintenance with regard to inclement weather response and snow removal. That was held earlier this year. Additionally, we held exercises with the Dulles Airport station exercises with law enforcement, as well as full-scale exercises in the yard, as well as in the Ashburn station. Those exercises were conducted with first responders in the region. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Metro was forced to change the process with which we were performing drills and full-scale exercises, emphasizing virtual and in-person tabletops versus full deployed exercises. The exercises for the stand-up of the Silver Line represent a step forward in getting in-person input and hands-on experience for our first responders and partners in the region. We are going to hold one additional tabletop exercise that will also incorporate feedback from critical stakeholders, such as Metro's AAC committee. They were also, the AAC has come out and performed an inspection of the stations to assure that they meet accessibility requirements and to provide us some feedback and guidance relative to any concerns and issues that were identified. That took place yesterday. Next slide, please. I'll turn it back to Lynn for next steps.
So as we continue to march towards passenger service, the next steps include some WMSC reviews that are underway, FTA reviews that are taking place on site next week, and that's all on schedule in anticipation of us seeking safety certification concurrence next month. We also continue to reach out to communities and future customers, and I want to recognize Judy Galen from Loudoun County, who's arranged for a webinar next week for 25 employers in the county to help us recruit smart benefits employee participants. I also want to thank alternate board member Helfer, who is pictured here. She was at our Arlington Festival. We have about 250 grassroots activities that we're reaching out to customers at, and we appreciate the board member's support as we do that with our customers. Next up is Dulles Plane Pull. Andy Off, captain of our team, on September 17th. If any of you would like to help us pull a United plane, we would welcome your participation. It is a heck of a way to send the message about the train-plane connection. Andy's up for the challenge. And we need 25 people on the road. So there you have it. That's the next outreach piece. Thank you very much, and open for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bowersox and Ms. Impastato. Are there any comments or questions from board members? Or, excuse me, committee members? Go ahead. Dr. Lowe?
Just one question for you, Ms. Bowersox. Just want to note how boldly you're representing the brand with your water bottle. Really great job there.
Thank you. I would say that I haven't had these manufactured, but I do have stickers for anything that you may want to mark and support us with.
Really have to acknowledge your brand discipline, and it's very impressive. My only question is about the PIC. Up until now, in the board briefings, when we've talked about the Silver Line, we've been talking about hiring. I just feel like that's most of the information that I've gotten. I know that we also had some kind of one-time exemption with the union in terms of how we were going to staff out the Silver Line. But clearly we also needed a PIC. And so I want to just try to understand, like, I'm hearing this 450 staff needed total. Is that we reallocated 450 staff through the PIC, or was that a different total?
So the 450 is all of the job titles that we need to fill out the Silver Line extension, from a car mechanic to a station manager.
Okay.
Okay? And so the PIC has to have 468, to be precise, people assigned to those jobs in order to operate the extension. What you're talking about is the one-time only agreement that we had with the union to hire from the street, people who are not matriculating up from bus operator through our human capital process, but rather coming from outside of the organization and getting trained for the first time as a train operator or station manager. But once trained, those people have the flexibility to pick a job assignment based in compliance with our collective bargaining agreement. So some of them, many of them, will want to be on the Silver Line, that's why they came in, but based on their seniority, they may or may not get their first choice of job assignment.
Oh,
Does that
they're
help?
in the PIC.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you for helping me understand that. I know that we have a lot of vacancies at WMATA. I saw a banner hanging in the L'Enfant Plaza station saying that we're hiring. And I'm particularly concerned about bus driver vacancies and how that impacts our ability to deliver service. Do you feel like in the big picture, the Silver Line PIC is going to impact our ability to deliver Metrobus?
No, we have known about this for long enough that has been baked into the pipeline in terms of staffing. And while everything that we do that adds service draws from the same pool, so it's not completely benign, it has been planned for.
That is great to hear. Thank you.
Mr. Letourneau?
Thank you, Mr. Drummer. I wanted to thank you, Lynn, and the whole team for hosting me at Dulles and for all the work that's gone into this. It is very clear from this presentation that Randy looks much better than I do in a hard hat. Nobody looks good, but clearly Randy has that down to a science, and my hard hat game was a little weak. I also wanted to recognize the drills that have taken place. We have pictured there Loudoun County Sheriff's units. We had a lot of participation, of course, from our Sheriff's Department as well as Loudoun County Fire Rescue. I've gotten great feedback from the county side over the last few weeks on those drills and from our emergency management folks. So I think we're doing a great job there. And on our part, I think we'll be ready. Everyone wants to know about timing, obviously, and I'm sure, the second Paul and Randy walk out of this room, they'll be asked, when's the Silver Line going to open? And I know we don't have the answer to that question, but just to kind of spell it out a little bit more from a timing standpoint, the safety certification process submitted to the MSC is going to occur mid-October. So can you just kind of walk us through from that point what happens?
Sure, thank you, Mr. Letourneau. So our goal operationally is to be prepared in mid-October to seek that concurrence for the safety certification. The safety certification was one of the 10 conditions of acceptance. At that point, we can, Teresa and I and others, go to the General, Brian Dwyer, who's going to change seats with me in a minute, can go to the general manager and say, we recommend that it is time for WMATA to accept the extension into the rail network. At that point, we would return to the board for starting to have a conversation about the opening date, but we need the WMSC and the FTA sign off in order to trigger that safety certification, in order to accept and then set the date for opening the service.
Will we have some degree, though, of a parallel discussion about the opening date? Because obviously, we need time to prepare to open, and we can't wait for the last minute.
That is certainly our hope, sir.
Okay. But Randy, you are not going to announce an opening date today, and the board, you're not going to ask the board to set one, right?
Not today, board member.
Okay.
But we hope to be.
Just being clear,
I think,
just to preempt questions.
We do have a meeting in 2 weeks, so every day we're making progress, and obviously these are important pieces. I know everyone in the community is dying to hear when we're gonna open it. We would love to open it tomorrow. We're getting really close. I would say we're getting into the, the 20-yard, the hot zone, now the football's back, or the red zone, so
Red zone.
we're getting there. So, hopefully we'll be back on the 22nd with another piece of information, and each day we're getting there.
Thank you. Ms. Martin Proctor?
Hi, for the presentation, and really looking forward to the opening of the Silver Line. I want to highlight especially that you had the AAC there, which is our Accessibility Advisory Committee, that their input was critical and put in place from the beginning to make sure that this place is accessible and inclusive. And I'm truly looking forward to knowing what they put in place and the highlights that they bring forth to show the community that we're working to make sure that our Silver Line and our Metro is fully accessible and inclusive all the way around. So I just wanted to highlight that and say thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing the things that have been included from the AAC that will allow for better accessibility and inclusion in the community.
Thank you. And as a product of full-scale exercises and drills all of my career, I want to say thank you for the progress that you all have made. Just tremendous work done in that arena, lessons learned, and we look forward to some of those reports. If there are no further questions, we will move to the next topic.
I'd like to stress that the information that will be relayed to the board in this briefing is to be considered preliminary, as the investigation is active and ongoing. All of the times and locations that we're going to discuss are approximate, as Metro is currently working to synchronize data recording systems and to fuse thousands of individual points of data gleaned from system downloads, reviews of CCTV, as well as interrogatories with individuals who responded to the accident. Information is subject to change as new data and information is discovered. This slide depicts a summary of the event which occurred on July the 30th on the red line. To the left of the depiction shows the Woodley Park Station. On the right of the depiction, there's a star that notes the location, the approximate location of an arcing event which occurred. There are 3 congruent timelines to follow to capture the common operating picture around this incident. These timelines include a fire alarm and in a subsequent evacuation at the DuPont Circle Station, which is far to the right of the arcing event, the events associated with the operation of train number 108, and secondary inspection and maintenance response and recovery activities. I'll briefly discuss the timelines separately. Beginning at approximately 9:07 p.m. on Saturday, July 30th, the Advanced Information Management System in the Rail Operations Control Center illuminated a fire alarm at the DuPont Circle Drainage Pumping Station. Metro's rail traffic controller preliminary deemed the event likely to be due to an arcing insulator and contacted the station manager as well as responders. At that time, the assistant operations manager in the control center made a separate request for emergency responders and requested DC Fire and Emergency Services respond to the DuPont Circle Station at approximately 9:17.
About 2 minutes later, the DuPont Circle station manager reported that they observed smoke from beyond the end gate. At around that same time, train number 103 arrived at DuPont Station on track 2 with a rail supervisor on board and stopped within the platform limits. They reported observing smoke ahead in the tunnel on track number 1. At that time, that was the first report of smoke. Tunnel fans were activated. The train operator of train number 103 was instructed to turn off the HVAC system throughout the train, berth the train on the platform, and offload the customers. DC Fire and Emergency Services arrived at approximately 9:31, and Metro Transit Police Department responded to the scene to facilitate an evacuation of the station. At this time, no responders entered the roadway to inspect the area, and an incident command system was initiated at approximately 9:32, with the command post located at the north entrance to DuPont Circle Station. While this was occurring at DuPont Circle, train 108 was arriving at Woodley Park Station on track number 1. The rail traffic controller, noting the drainage pumping system alarm, instructed train 108 to hold at Woodley Park Station. However, the train operator did not respond and departed the station. At this point, it's under investigation as to whether or not there was a communications gap with the radio. Train 108 departed in the direction of DuPont Circle Station and traveled approximately 2,000 feet before losing speed commands. The rail traffic controller observed that the loss of speed commands on the train was likely to have been caused by a down track circuit, which was triggered as a response to the alarm in the drainage pumping station. They again attempted to contact the train operator, who responded and advised that they had lost their speed commands. The controller requested them to perform an inspection of the area in which they were, to evaluate the down track circuit, and provided permission for them to proceed to DuPont Circle Station on track 1. This occurred before the first report of smoke by the station manager at DuPont Station. The train operator traveled another 1,000 feet before stopping and reporting observing sparks on the right side of the tunnel wall, approximately 100 feet in advance of their location. At that point, train 108 was instructed to key down, make announcements to customers, reverse ends, and proceed back to the platform at Woodley Park Station on track 1. Customers were offloaded at Woodley Park Station at approximately 9:30, and no injuries were reported. While the activities of train 108, 103, and the action at DuPont took place, there was also inspection and maintenance, response, and recovery activities that were underway. Third rail power was de-energized on track 1, and tunnel ventilation fans were activated, and the rail traffic controller instructed empty train 103 to perform a non-revenue inspection with the rail supervisor aboard. At about 9:34, that rail supervisor did report fire and smoke at a chain marker near where the arcing event is depicted. Metro subsequently established a bus bridge, and Metro's emergency response team deployed to the scene and were awaiting the establishment of access protections in conjunction with instructions from DC Fire and EMS and the control center. While on the platform, DC Fire and EMS, Metro's Transit Police, and Metro's emergency response team observed that the smoke appeared to be clearing. At that time, DC Fire and EMS cleared the scene at approximately 10:23 p.m., turning the scene over to Metro to allow staff to enter the system and diagnose the cause of the smoke, which again, at this point, was believed to have been an arcing insulator. The staff entered the system and observed that the fire was electrical in nature and unrelated to third rail power. They reported observing the fire along the wall of the tunnel, which resulted in a second call for emergency services at approximately 10:56. Emergency services returned to the platform, and ERT coordinated additional maintenance units to assist in identifying the source of the electrical fire. Metro personnel were not able to access the roadway, as they were instructed to stand by while additional third rail protections were established. The work zone was not established until approximately 2:36 a.m. the following morning. At that point, Low-voltage electricians quickly identified the circuits involved and took action to remove AC power and isolate wiring it at a junction box to stop the flow of electricity, which was feeding the arcing event. After this action, the arcing stopped and the smoke dissipated again. At approximately 2:40, the scene was returned to Metro's emergency response team, and DC Fire remained on scene until approximately 3:35 a.m. as damage assessments were commenced. The preliminary probable cause of the arcing event was a low-voltage transformer failure that resulted in an overheating condition. The overheating condition resulted in a failure of the insulating material and subsequent electrical arcing that damaged adjacent equipment, including communications and automatic train control cabling until the power source to the low-voltage cable was removed. An immediate emergency inspection of the entire Metro system was commenced to ensure that there were no opportunities for similar failures. As a result of that inspection, there were no additional anomalies reported with low-voltage transformers or any issues with regard to the cabling condition identified. The arcing event resulted in damages to multiple cables, which required replacement and testing before the restoration of service. The left picture denotes the active arcing event, and the right picture denotes the damaged cabling. All of these cables serve different functions, including communications, radio cable, fiber optic cable, and signal control cable, in addition to low voltage power cable. As you can see, those cables were all damaged, which required extensive mobilization of resources to replace the cabling and perform the appropriate testing in order to restore service. Upon receiving notification of the evacuation for life safety reasons at DuPont, Metro dispatched a cross-functional team to assess the scene and conduct a subsequent investigation. Our teams have worked with relevant WMATA subject matter experts to review the facts and data. Recognizing that there were multiple opportunities for Metro's response to have been more agile and rapid, we conducted 3 after-action review information gathering sessions with involved employees. Those after-action review gathering sessions focused on our customer experience, emergency response coordination, and damage assessments, as well as repair coordination and system recovery. There were multiple opportunities for improvement in the coordination of the on-scene response and damage assessments, and the coordination of repair and restoration of service, and in communications to our customers. Specifically, there were unnecessary delays in communications to the public about reroute options, coordination of bus shuttles, and communication facing forward with regard to the needs for the restoration of service to accommodate the repairs that were needed. Metro has recognized that we have a real opportunity to improve, and my colleague, Mr. Dwyer, will detail some of the actions that we have underway. We are conducting a final summary AAR with all of the first responders later this month to further inform process improvements and feed the additional investigatory findings and final determinations. At this time, I'd like to turn the briefing over to Mr. Dwyer, Metro's Chief Operating Officer, to provide details on the corrective actions that we are implementing.
Teresa, thank you. Good morning. So just with regards to the post-incident actions underway, for the improved communications and quick deployment, bus operations has already set up a list of personnel who will be surge personnel. So when we have an event in process like this or can anticipate one, there'll be immediate calls and emails sent to folks to try to get folks rostered up and ready to come into work. I would say that in a perfect world, it would be wonderful to have folks who could pick into standby positions, et cetera, but I'm sure you can all understand with regards to vehicles and with regards to personnel, it's difficult when we have shortages to have people on standby because those are buses we aren't running in service on a daily basis. So I think this was kind of developed before I got here, but I fully endorse it. I would also say that bus operations really dove into the idea of customer signage, and we have signage that will be delivered by the end of the month that we can probably get to about a half of our stations. Will probably be by the end of October that we'll have it in all stations. I would say this isn't a box-checking exercise because we're having ongoing discussions between bus and the rail team to determine the best way to deploy those signs. So it's one thing to get them where they need to be. It's another thing to make sure that they're stored, we can check on them, and that there's kind of a coordinated response to this. As far as incident response, so Teresa talked about the fact that there was an immediate kind of investigation into low-voltage power supplies throughout the system. We've established a program by which those low-voltage supplies will be checked more in line with what we currently do for high-voltage power supplies. So that has had, at least up to this point, kind of a more robust process by which they're checked. And I think what this revealed is we really need to ensure there's a program for low voltage as well. And we may actually, we haven't fully figured this out, but we may kind of determine a better way to fit that within a department. But that's ongoing, but the idea of the program being in place has already started. And with regards to kind of longer-term fixes, they are longer-term fixes. But I would say, look, I've been here a month, and I've been trying to get out to every emergency I can to see how our customers and how our employees react in those situations. And I think the employees are committed to doing a great job and trying to do everything safely. I do think, just as an observation thus far, we need to integrate our activities in the field between our employees. We need to make sure that every employee we have out there, the vast majority, probably all the employees we have, are looking to do the best job they can from a safety standpoint and from a customer service standpoint. We need to make sure we give them the information and give them the direction they need as far as what they're doing and where they are out there. And I would say that applies not just to direct operating personnel, it applies to every employee we have out there. And as you folks are well aware of the fact, with the amount of employees we have out there, you know, cleaning stations, performing maintenance, being on standby for vehicle issues, we have plenty of folks who we can designate and kind of bring in a pinch in an emergency. So we're really focused on what's the best way to kind of creatively harness all those people and get the right information to customers. I do think that, you know, there has probably been talk before about kind of an integrated control center. We are in the process now of moving that location, and we're really diving into what can we do right now from kind of an architectural and physical standpoint to kind of house those resources together and really look at this more from a command and control structure. That's the physical part of this. There's also the longer term idea of it's great to have people housed together. How do we integrate the processes that we currently have in the BOCC and in the ROC and with the police department? So that's the hard work that we'll be doing in the next number of months. And with regards to the asset management portion, I think I've covered the fact that we have a more robust program in place now to test the low voltage supplies, and we'll continue to vet that to see if it's effective.
Okay, if that concludes the presentation, I want to say thank you for such a comprehensive laydown on what happened. And to Randy, to Teresa, and to Brian, I want to say, extend special thanks to you for your transparency, your teamwork, and for your comprehensive approach in problem solving. Haven't seen this before, and it really pays huge dividends. This is an exercise in tremendous transparency, and I want to say thank you for that.
Thank you.
And right now, I'll open it up to committee members, and I'll start with Mr. Schneidberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just add my name to what Mr. Drummer just said. It is sort of refreshing. And Mr. Dwyer, welcome.
Thank you, sir.
Thankfully, we have Mr. Letourneau on the board, so we could have as a translator. That's it. I'm sure he's feeling like it. He's at home. He's at home now. So I grew up in Connecticut, so I'm a little familiar, but we may need Mr. Letourneau to translate every now and then.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Dr. Lowe.
Okay, I'd like to go back to, Teresa, to your presentation. Some of what was in your presentation is so different from things that I was reading right after the incident. I just need to make sure I'm not getting confused and to make sure that I understood this. Because in the big picture with this process, we are seeking facts and not fault, and we need to know exactly what happened. Was a train with passengers on it ordered to perform a track inspection at any time?
The rail traffic controller, upon receiving report from Train 108 that it had lost speed commands, gave them the instruction to perform an inspection and gave them permissive block to proceed. That instruction was given before there was a report of smoke or fire from the DuPont station manager.
Okay. But then there was a second order for a train to perform a track inspection, but it was train 103 after the passengers had gotten off at DuPont.
That's correct. Train 103 was a non-revenue train that was instructed to proceed on the adjacent track where power was active. Power had already been de-energized on the incident track.
Okay. That makes sense. Train 103 had a rail supervisor on it.
Correct.
Why?
Rail supervisors regularly ride trains throughout the system. They'll perform operational observations, perform job briefings, and accompany employees as they operate as part of our quality assurance and safety assurance activities.
Seems like that really came in handy here. What percentage of trains have a rail supervisor on them?
I don't know the exact number offhand, but I do know that we conduct both scheduled and random supervisory trips. I'll have to get the scheduled supervisory trips information to you.
Okay, but it's not some kind of incredible miracle that the rail supervisor just happened to be there when something bad happened, because we're prepared for that.
We do have a number of rail supervisors out and about throughout the system throughout the service day.
Yeah, it's not a guarantee, but we're working the odds. Okay, that's helpful. Mr. Dwyer, a question for you about, in terms of after action and what the signage piece in particular. I feel like I've been asking for better communication with customers as they enter the system in terms of signage, like from the first day I got on the board. So I'm like crying with relief to hear that even if this is what it takes to get action on that it's going to happen. My husband actually boarded the morning after the incident and didn't know about the bus bridge in advance. He was able to like get in the system and get on a train like without realizing that anything was wrong. The board did receive a complaint after that happened. So we could address that, that'd be great.
Rightfully so, yes.
Yeah. Bigger picture, as we think about how to step up our signage game and do this right, please remember that we do have the Riders Advisory Committee and the Accessibility Committee right there to tell us what the customer experience is as we toy with. I totally agree with your statement that there are many heroes within WMATA who are out in the system every day who can help us figure out how to do this better. But let's take advantage of those committees as well and make sure that they're in the loop.
Could not agree with you more. We were actually here with the Riders Committee last night, and we're attending the next Access Committee. I think it's next week that it will be. Oh, pardon me. I'm awfully sorry, folks. I got to get used to the mic. And I know everybody's confused with the accent. We attended the Riders Committee last night here. We had a great discussion because I really think, I don't want to steal Mr. Clark's thunder, but it was really about using these folks for what they're here for and engaging them and kind of, if we need to get them tours, if they have questions for us, if there's, they're here representing our customers. And I know that may sound trite, but we want to take full advantage of that. And I think we had a number of staff here. We were trying to tell them, we want to hear from you because it's really critical for us to get that insight so we can try to serve the customers better. We have our first meeting with the Access Group next week. We've talked to Christian about that a number of times, and I will say, my first job at the trains at the MBTA was in our system-wide accessibility office, and it was during the key station plan and the ADA just being rolled out, so that's something I'm really passionate about. And Christian and his team do great work here, and we're anxious to kind of hear from them. And we have a number of parties who are on both committees, so we actually had a brief discussion about that last night as well. But I could not agree with you more.
Okay, that's great. As a point of order, my dad is from Massachusetts, so
Oh.
you're speaking my language. I do just want to clarify, though, that I don't just mean like go to committee meetings. Don't just be on Zoom with them or sit in a room with them. Go get RAC members to go to stations with you and show you what their experience is like when they enter the system. Just, I think that like WMATA staff are so in it sometimes
Yeah.
that they just don't realize what civilians don't know, right? And how a board member's spouse could be boarding the system the day after a major incident that was covered in every single media and just not even know that it had happened or that service was disrupted. That's just get out of the rooms and into the real world.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Driver. Just real quick, two quick things. Back on train 108. So do we have any indication as to why, when the initial RTC transmission occurred, the operator did not respond?
So we've interviewed both the operator as well as the rail traffic controller and have listened to all of the radio communications as well as the ambient microphones in the control center. At this point, it appears that there was an issue with radio transmission such that the transmission was not received and acknowledged. The train operator reported that they did not hear that instruction, and there is ambient discussion within the control center from the rail traffic controller saying that they believe the train may not have heard them.
Okay. Not necessarily mechanical or equipment failure, just course of business kind of ambient noise that made it difficult to hear.
Possibly. We are looking into the radio communication in the area. There are areas in the system where intermittently there are radio failures. It does happen, and it may have happened in this case. As I said, we're still learning very much every day. We just didn't want to wait before informing the board of what
Yep.
we've learned thus far.
The other thing, real quickly, I think is actually, I wanted to make sure we put a finer point on what you said, Mr. Dwyer, at the end about integrating sort of command operations, because I think that's a really important point that deserves some attention and maybe another discussion. But the concept would be to basically put, all of the functionality of safety, emergency response, all that in sort of one place with rail operations and bus operations.
Yeah, and I would say that it would not only be the control center function, but actually trying to coordinate that in the field as well. Because I think right now, I've probably gone out in the field for specific events probably about 5 times in the last month since I've been here. And again, I can't stress enough, we have folks out there who are trying to do what they believe they should do. The effort at times is uncoordinated. And I think what we need to make sure of, we can absolutely eventually get this set up where from a kind of physical standpoint and a procedural standpoint, we have our ducks in order. It's really getting that information to the staff in the field. And I apologize, I didn't mention one thing about signage, that the bus ops team is fantastic. They hopped on this, immediately, started kind of getting all this signage in place. We then really do have to dig into the work of, we have the signs, what do we do with them? And get into real specificity about how we deploy them. I know that sounds kind of rudimentary, but kind of in the fog of the event, that can really get lost. And I think that's really our next step here.
Thank you. Secretary Ports?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Teresa, I want to thank you, first of all, for starting out your presentation saying that you don't have all the information that you're disseminating that now, because having been involved in many, many emergency operations, myself, whether it be at the port, airport, rail, bus, et cetera, I always found out that early information was wrong, okay? And that's usually what I tell my governor, first off, talk about the incident, but you tell him that early information's wrong and that you need to dig in later. So I really appreciate the fact that you're doing that. I also want to thank Randy, especially for the transparency and getting the word out to all the board members immediately, and your team, of course, getting the information and constantly keeping us updated. I've not seen that kind of recognition before, and I really appreciate that. Randy, I know I sent you a note on that during the incident, and really appreciate that transparency. On the safety side, I do agree that it is every employee's obligation for safety. And what I've learned in being in the utility industry, which is highly regulated, we used to do walk-arounds with a supervisor and an employee every week and look for those physical barriers, those physical things that are wrong, and also talk about the behavioral things that may have occurred as to why those things are in the wrong place, you know. And I think it's really important that you have a structure where supervisors, I'm talking about first line supervisors, would take a random employee or two now and then and walk the stations and look at each of these facilities so that they understand the importance that they play in safety. I think it's paramount that we do that. And it sounds to me, at first glance, that many things went well during this incident. There may have been a few gaps. We heard one. I'm just going to jokingly say, Tracy, that there's a communication gap in your family there. But there are communication breakdowns in any incident. As you're living them, they're sometimes challenging. And I understand that from an emergency management standpoint. But I think the key is to learn from it and disseminate that information to all the employees throughout the organization through what we used to call tailgates.
Agreed.
Or any kind of meeting that you would have on a regular basis. And I think updates like that would be great. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any comments or questions by any other board members?
If I could quickly respond.
Sure.
I couldn't agree more. I did want to emphasize to folks that this, part of why we wanted to brief was not just transparency, but also an acknowledgement of the level of complexity associated with Metro's response. That you had 3 simultaneous types of events that were occurring, and we're recognizing that we have significant opportunities for improvement here. That we did not perform the way in which we're satisfied with, and that we're really taking that to heart and working internally to dig into all of the opportunities for improvement, looking at timelines and missed opportunities for synchronization and coordination that led to unnecessary delays. And we're committed to doing better with each successive incident response.
Thank you. And there is no substitute for the work done in this incident, so thank you very much and continue that progress. With no further business to come before the committee, we stand adjourned, and I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Smedberg to begin our special board meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'm Paul Smedberg, Chair of the WMATA Board. Thank you for being here today for the special board meeting. Since we just called roll at our previous meeting, we'll move right to the one item on today's agenda. The Code of Ethics for members of the WMATA Board of Directors provides that a member may participate in a manner notwithstanding a conflict of interest after obtaining a recommendation from the ethics officer by making a declaration that he or she is able to participate fairly and objectively in the interest of WMATA, which is effective upon concurrence by the board. Board member Don Drummer has disclosed that he accepted an invitation to meet with the EV Bus Coalition members. The EV Bus Coalition advocates, among other things, for an acceleration of WMATA's transition to all bus fleets. The board ethics officer recommends that in order to participate in the board's consideration of matters regarding electric buses, Mr. Drummer update his disclosure to reflect a meeting with the EV Bus Coalition and declare that he can participate in electric bus matters fairly and objectively, notwithstanding the meeting. Mr. Drummer has submitted his disclosure update and a declaration consistent with the foregoing. Therefore, in accordance with the board's bylaws and code of ethics, I move that the Board of Directors concurs with Mr. Drummer's declaration, permitting him to participate in consideration of matters regarding electric buses. The presiding chair will read the declaration into the record prior to any action being taken in any meeting of the board or of a committee at which bus electrification matters are considered. Is there a second? Seconded by Secretary Ports. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. With no further business to come before the board, we stand adjourned and we will reconvene in executive session. Thank you.